Another year passed, and another, and Michael was now living his 6th year with Simon. He lived as before. He went nowhere, only spoke when necessary, and had only smiled twice in all those years. Once when Matryona gave him food, and a second time when the gentleman was in their hut. Simon was more than pleased with his workman. He never now asked him where he came from, and only feared lest Michael should go away. They were all at home one day. Matryona was putting iron pots in the oven. The children were running along the benches and looking out of the window. Simon was sewing at one window, and Michael was fastening on a heel at the other. One of the boys ran along the bench to Michael, leant on his shoulder, and looked out of the window. "Look, Uncle Michael, there is a lady with little girls. She seems to be coming here, and one of the girls is lame." When the boy said that, Michael dropped his work, turned to the window, and looked out into the street. Simon was surprised. Michael never used to look out into the street, but now he pressed against the window, staring at something. Simon also looked out and saw that a well-dressed woman was really coming to his hut, leading by the hand 2 little girls in fur coats and woolen shawls. The girls could hardly be told one from the other, except that one of them was crippled in her left leg and walked with a limp. The woman stepped into the porch and entered the passage. Feeling about for the entrance, she found the latch, which she lifted and opened the door. She let the 2 girls go in first and followed them into the hut. "Good day, good folk. Pray come in," said Simon. "What can we do for you?" The woman sat down by the table. The 2 little girls pressed close to her knees, afraid of the people in the hut. "I want leather shoes made for these 2 little girls for spring." "We can do that. We never have made such small shoes, but we can make them. Either welted or turnover shoes, linen lined. My man, Michael, is a master at the work." Simon glanced at Michael and saw that he had left his work and was sitting with his eyes fixed on the little girls. Simon was surprised. It was true the girls were pretty, with black eyes, plump and rosy-cheeked, and they wore nice kerchiefs and fur coats, but still Simon could not understand why Michael should look at them like that, just as if he had known them before. He was puzzled, but went on talking with the woman and arranging the price. Having fixed it, he prepared the measure. The woman lifted the lame girl onto her lap and said, "Take 2 measures from this little girl. Make 1 shoe for the lame foot and 3 for the sound one. They both have the same sized feet. They are twins." Simon took the measure and, speaking of the lame girl, said, "How did it happen to her? She is such a pretty girl. Was she born so?" "No, her mother crushed her leg. Then Matryona joined in. She wondered who this woman was and whose the children were, so she said, 'Are not you their mother then?' 'No, my good woman. I am neither their mother nor any relation to them. They were quite strangers to me, but I adopted them. They are not your children, and yet you are so fond of them?' How can I help being fond of them? I fed them both at my own breasts. I had a child of my own, but God took him. I was not so fond of him as I now am of them. Then whose children are they? The woman, having begun talking, told them the whole story. It is about 6 years since their parents died, both in 1 week. Their father was buried on the Tuesday, and their mother died on the Friday. These orphans were born 3 days after their father's death, and their mother did not live another day. My husband and I were then living as peasants in the village. We were neighbors of theirs, our yard being next to theirs. Their father was a lonely man, a woodcutter in the forest. When felling trees one day, they let one fall on him. It fell across his body and crushed his bowels out, and they hardly got him home before his soul went to God. And that same week, his wife gave birth to twins. These little girls. She was poor and alone. She had no one, young or old, with her. Alone she gave them birth, and alone she met her death. The next morning I went to see her, but when I entered the hut, she, poor thing, was already stark and cold. In dying, she had rolled onto this child and crushed her leg. The village folk came to the hut, washed the body, laid her out, made a coffin, and buried her. They were good folk. The babies were left alone. What was to be done with them? I was the only woman there who had a baby at the time. I was nursing my firstborn, 8 weeks old. So I took them for a time. The peasants came together and thought what to do with them. And at last, they said to me, "For the present, Mary, you had better keep the girls, and later on, we will arrange what to do for them." So I nursed the sound one at my breast, but at first I did not feed this crippled one. I did not suppose she would live. But then I thought to myself, why should the poor innocent suffer? I pitied her and began to feed her. And so I fed my own boy, and these two, the 3 of them, at my own breast. I was young and strong, and had good food, and God gave me so much milk that at times it even overflowed. I used sometimes to feed 2 at a time, while the 3rd was waiting. When one had enough, I nursed the 3rd, and God so ordered it that these grew up, while my own was buried before he was 2 years old. And I had no more children, though we prospered. Now my husband is working for the corn merchant at the mill. The pay is good, and we are well off. But I have no children of my own, and how lonely I should be without these little girls. How can I help loving them? They are the joy of my life. She pressed the lame little girl to her with one hand, while with the other she wiped the tears from her cheeks. And Matryona sighed and said, "The proverb is true that says, one may live without father or mother, but one cannot live without God." So they talked together, when suddenly the whole hut was lighted up, as though by summer lightning, from the corner where Michael sat. They all looked towards him and saw him sitting, his hands folded on his knees, gazing upwards and smiling. The woman went away with the girls. Michael rose from the bench, put down his work, and took off his apron. Then, bowing low to Simon and his wife, he said, "Farewell, masters. God has forgiven me. I ask your forgiveness too, for anything done amiss." And they saw that a light shone from Michael. And Simon rose, bowed down to Michael, and said, "I see, Michael, that you are no question you. Only tell me this. How is it that when I found you and brought you home, you were gloomy, and when my wife gave you food, you smiled at her and became brighter? Then when the gentleman came to order the boots, you smiled again and became brighter still. And now, when this woman brought the little girls, you smiled a third time and have become as bright as day. Tell me, Michael, why does your face shine so? And why did you smile those 3 times? And Michael answered, Light shines from my eye because I have been punished. But now God has pardoned me. Hey, and I smiled 3 times because God sent me to learn 3 truths. And I have learned them. One I learned when your wife pitied me, and that is why I smiled the first time. The second I learned when the rich man ordered the boots, and then I smiled again. And now, when I saw those little girls, I learnt the third and last truth, and I smiled the 3rd time. And Simon said, Tell me, Michael, what did God punish you for? And what were the 3 truths that I, too,